This entire proceeding was politically motivated to begin with, and as far as I'm concerned, it was nothing but a political railroad job from the very beginning, including the indictment. You look back, and even after misrepresenting testimony to the grand jury, the district attorney was only able to get 15 of the 23 grand jurors to even vote for an indictment.
When the Oklahomans for Responsible Liquor Control began their latest drive for liquor by the drink 3 months ago, they were faced with the task of collecting more signatures than any initiative petition drive in history. But today the group showed up at the Secretary of State's office before their deadline with 222,000 signatures, nearly 100,000 more signatures than they needed. The validity of those signatures will surely be challenged. 2 organizations in the state have already said they will take the issue to the Supreme Court. But organizers of the drive say they are sure they will win the right for a ballot.
Perhaps the fact that we have filed petitions of support from every single county will certainly put to rest once and for all the notion that this is strictly a metropolitan item. It is not a metropolitan issue. It's not a wet or dry issue. It's an issue of honesty.
It is too early to speculate on when voters may get a chance to decide if buying liquor by the drink should be legal in Oklahoma. Calling a vote is up to the discretion of the governor, and he cannot make that decision until all challenges to the signatures have been cleared. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the state capitol.
The current 4-cent sales tax in Oklahoma City generates about $80 million a year for the city. But city fathers say that's not enough to pay for capital improvements which are desperately needed, such as improved sewer lines and streets. At an informal meeting last Thursday, city council members talked about letting the people vote on a 1-cent sales tax increase. Mayor Coase suggested if the proposal is approved, the increase should be in effect for at least 10 years. All but one council member agreed on setting a voting date for the sales tax hike. Jerry Gilbert told Action 4 why he won't support the proposal in its present form.
I just don't see how this sales tax proposal can get enough public support to pass if we don't do one of 2 things. Either we need to say it's only going to last 3 years so that the people get a good opportunity to see what kind of stewards we are of the money, or we ought to give the people an opportunity to vote on exactly what the money is going to be spent for. And that could be done. I outlined a proposal Thursday that would have done that.
Gilbert agrees that many streets and sewer lines around the city are in need of repair. However, he says capital improvements also include items he would like to see omitted. And until he knows exactly what all the money in additional sales tax might be spent on, the proposal won't get his vote. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
School administrators say it's a matter of survival for education in Oklahoma. A $250 million drop in state revenues means a $100 million drop in educational funding. The Oklahoma Education Association has figured out what that could mean for some school districts. They estimate, for example, that Oklahoma City schools would lose more than $4 million in state aid. Mid-Del schools would lose nearly $3 million. The loss for Moore would be $2.5 million, and that's about the same loss the Putnam City schools would receive. For Edmond schools, the loss would be about $1.3 million.
The quality of education simply cannot stand a crushing blow of 16% cut.
Dr. Bill Anderson is superintendent of the Norman Public Schools and is considered an authority on schools and state funding. He will lose $1.5 million in funding. Last year he cut school spending where he could, but this year the axe has to fall on his teaching staff. 61 positions may have to fall.
And it's like for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for every one of us when something is diminished in this state, whether it be in any town, even the smallest with only 50 or 60 students, to the ones with 40,000. This state will suffer if that happens.
Educators believe there's a lesson in history here. They say the size of cuts schools face could set the progress of education back 10 to 15 years. I'm Charles Schnitzer. Bella Shaw has a look at the cuts in the state's colleges and universities.
While most of the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma is sagging under the weight of hard economic times and a natural gas oversupply, there are a few companies actually prospering right now. Those are the companies with enough capital to take advantage of low equipment cost, or those who don't have to take wildcat drilling risks. One of those firms, Mid-Plains Petroleum, based here in Oklahoma City, is finding a ready market for crude oil. Mid-Plains buys and sells crude. No drilling ventures are involved, and they're making money.
We go for a long term. We try to make a smaller amount per barrel, but base it on a large amount of barrels. We try to have the best service around. You know, we are a service company, and the price out there to the producers is about the same all over. So we provide the service that will get the oil in here to make us more money on volume.
Recently, the number of active rigs nationwide has increased, while on a local level it's gone down slightly over the last few months. But there's still money to be made in the Oklahoma oil patch for those who are patient and have the capital to survive. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
And today what we find is that the American people are asleep. We don't understand the true nature of communism. Communism is a threat to the United States because if we read the ideology that Marx wrote, if we read the words of Lenin, what we come to realize what they're concerned about is they're concerned about world domination. They're concerned about atheistic communism because what we realize is the problem of Israel, the fundamental problem of the Soviet Union is that it's a atheistic nation.
The heavy rains and flooding in this part of North Midwest City forced hundreds to flee their homes yesterday. From the air, there didn't seem to be much improvement today, but there was. In some places, the water line had dropped 10 inches, but it was still too high to accommodate anything but four-wheel drive trucks. And that was one of the reasons the police weren't letting residents back in here today. There were enough cars underwater already. The other reason was natural gas. It could be seen bubbling from leaks beneath the water. But some, like Fred Shedd, found a way to get in anyway. He's lived at this trailer park for 16 years, and he's never seen anything like this. He was out of town when the flood hit. That was the good news. The bad news was he was visiting Guthrie. But today he made it home and waded in for a few essential items.
I'm going to go in and get me some medicine, a bottle of scotch, and go back to the motel room.
All right, I'll be back in a minute. About a half a mile down the road, the Ardens had made it home too. They arrived to find a front yard full of water and a face in the window that seemed to sum things up. Larry and Jan Arden's living room carpet was ruined by the water. This morning, neighbors helped them peel it up. What they were most angry about was having to haggle with police for 3 hours just to get into the house. But they say they were fortunate not to have more damage and to have friends to help clean up.
Oh yeah, it's great. Everyone's getting together and helping each other. Something like this brings everybody together. And we have several of us here right now helping us clean up and offers for come in to eat lunch, whatever. So everyone's helping out.
But for others, the damage may be worse, and it may be hours yet before they can get in to see it. Jeff Fowler, Action 4 in North Midwest City.
As the water has dropped, so has the temperature, putting the rush on ONG workmen. Service to many Midwest City residents had been turned off because of the flooding, but now they want it back on, and quickly. Crews have been working double time to restore the gas lines so that those lucky enough to still be at home can have a warm home. In this area of Midwest City, the lucky are few. At the Ballerina Trailer Park, there's an eerie silence that tells you no one's home. Heavy rains had brought high tides here before, but nothing like this. In the fight between nature and trailer, the trailers had lost. Skirtings were literally ripped off by the rushing water as it rose to ruin the insides of mobile homes. The majority of the people here today came only to pick up a few belongings. Dorothy Spruill has been staying with her daughter since Thursday. Coming back this afternoon only reminded her of the mess she'd left behind.
I was just dumbfounded because the water was up to that top step and it never gotten that high before. It's usually to the bottom step, and we'd stay in. It'd be dry like this here. We could stay in the trailer, but we couldn't this time.
Dorothy and her neighbors have no idea when they'll be able to return home. There's been no word yet on when the power will be restored. They hope soon life will be restored back to normal. Sherry Sellers, Action 4 in Midwest City. Oklahomans filled every seat in the Myriad, and then when there were no seats left, they filled the aisles. In all, there were 18,000 people in the arena, waiting to fill their hearts and souls with song and scripture from Billy Graham. The evangelist, who has traveled the world with his word, began his sermon appropriately with a prayer for the troubled foreign land of Lebanon.
And let's pray for the families of those Marines that were killed. Because you see, we lost in one blast 1/5 as many as Israel lost in a whole year of fighting in Lebanon.
Billy Graham and his crusade will be at the Myriad all this week. It's likely much of his sermon will consist of prayers for world peace, because Graham says he fears we are now living at the very edge. Sherry Sellers, Action 4 at the Myriad.
The OU visit is the first of many institutional visits that will take place in Oklahoma this fall and spring. The purpose of the visits is to monitor the implementation of the measures that were described in the state's and the institution's extended revised state plan for desegregation of higher ed. So we will focus entirely on what measures are taking place and how they're progressing and whether they can reasonably ensure that the desegregation goals will be met.
When we think about desegregation, or a lot of people think about numbers. Are you looking at number of blacks compared to whites, or how do you figure that out?
Well, numbers are one thing, of course, one measure, but we're also looking at overall efforts and perceptions of different people involved in the implementation of the measures.
Unless Congress and the administration move quickly and decisively to reduce the deficit, the capital markets will run short of credit next year. That means interest rates will skyrocket, housing production will fall, and millions of Americans will lose their jobs. In short, we will be confronting another recession, possibly before the election.
But if indeed a backup comes, that a community has new to complete the building of the North Canadian the stench. These needs, well, gosh, they were needed several years ago, and we are just trying to say to the people that, hey, if we don't get any help now, our problems are only going to get worse. And it's tough on a council member to get complaints from the community and then go down to City Hall, and there's no money there to take care of them with. It's very frustrating.
We do not anticipate any deterioration of service. I think obviously one thing that this would mean would be that we would likely come back to the Commission sooner as a result of this application than we would otherwise. We are required by law to come to the Commission every 2 years for a review of our rates, and certainly before we would allow any deterioration of our service, we would go back to the Commission.
$900. In addition to our reliable hardware and software, Bosch & Lowell provides
Robotics, the way of the future. Today at the State Fairgrounds, robots were on display for all to marvel. Companies across the U.S. are beginning to mass-produce robots for practical home use, and people are beginning to show a marked interest. Everyone is trying to get a closer look.
The key is the fact is, if it can wash dishes and mow the lawn, then it'll really take off. Once they'll do that, that's the main question, or fix a mixed string. But with this particular robot, now try and hide on the table, it, with this arm, like I said, it can be a babysitter, it can be a sentry, be able to vacuum your floor about January once they develop it. It has a fire extinguisher that you can go out and, just like RDD2, it will come out and put out a fire.
Besides robots, other aspects of the high-tech world were on exhibit today. The computer craze has become more than a novelty for most people. The number of in-home computers has increased steadily for the last few years. And judging by the size of today's expo, there are plenty of companies ready to expand on this growing market and take advantage of a culture growing dependent on computers for everyday use. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
For gorillas at the Oklahoma City Zoo, the only thing worse than being in the doghouse is residing in the ape house. The huge primates have been restricted to small, cramped quarters ever since the first gorilla arrived at the zoo. This crowded situation has prompted zoo officials to initiate the Great Escape. That's the name given to a new fundraising campaign. The zoo needs $2 million to build a 3-acre outdoor natural environment for its gorillas and orangutans. Great Escape participants feel they can get necessary donations, even though the zoo just completed a successful fundraising drive for its Aquaticus project.
Now, we have a gorilla population, and the fact that they're so endangered in the wild and they're also endangered in captivity, I feel we're going to cater to a different set of potential donators who have gorillas or the great apes as a prime specialty or interest and will happily donate to it, even though they may have already donated to Aquaticus, yes.
Some gorillas are a little luckier. The zoo has a mini playground that still restricts the apes from having enough room to monkey around, but the primates appear to enjoy the outdoor life they do receive. Those involved in the Great Escape say this project is a crucial step in the preservation of apes. The animals will be happier and healthier in larger quarters. Plus now zoo workers are a little reluctant to handle irritable gorillas. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
As it stands now then, because we don't have any city ordinances to that effect, anyone can go in and handle food without any knowledge of sanitation or anything else.
Well, other than what they get from the manager, yes, that's
and
true.
If the manager has no knowledge, then you're up the
mm,
proverbial creek, huh?
Yeah, that's the reason we want to get this instituted.
The only problem we might have is in a situation where someone may be going somewhere like Weatherford or Clinton where no other bus line serves. Other than that, there shouldn't be any problem getting where they want to go at all.
So Trailways is trying to pick up the slack?
The Trailways and the other carriers are doing everything they can to pick up the slack and not strand anybody.
You know, it's not news to say that we've gone through a knowledge explosion in medicine. And it seems that the more we learn, the more need there is to specialize or even subspecialize. And it therefore becomes more of a problem for a patient to find the right kind of doctor for the ailment that he seems to have, particularly if he's new in town.
I would suggest that one of the first things you do is call the County Medical Society.
Here's County Medical Society.
Your local county medical society can give you the name and the location of a specialist if you know the type of doctor that you need.
What type of physician are you needing?
They have a listing of all physicians. They can tell you a little bit about the physician's background.
The medical society can also refer you to a good primary care doctor for your general health needs.
Here's County Medical Society.
Now, this doctor is one of the best means of taking advantage of the whole health care system. Another excellent way to find yourself a good physician is through the referral of a good friend. You know, it's obvious that there are not as many specialists in the rural communities as there are in the big cities. That's why it's important for you to establish you and your family with a good primary care doctor. He'll not only take good care of you, but he'll get you the right specialist when you need it. Take good care of your family. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
You decide whether or not you're going to call a special session to raise taxes.
No. I have said that we'll decide by the 14th of this month. And people say, well, why do you pick the 14th? I said, well, that's the last date. There are two things that we've been trying to find out for sure. We're having a failure of revenue this month. November, we have a 4% reduction in expenditures to the state, in allocations to the state agencies. And that's because we didn't collect as much as we appropriated. And we could live with that. But we're trying to see what the failure of revenue will be in December, and it's estimated to be maybe as high as 25%. So that'd be a fourth of the funds for an agency. And then that's followed in January by a projected 15 to 20% reduction and so forth. But anyway, in the next 5 months, unless the economy picks up extremely well, better than it's picking up, and it is picking up, but unless it just accelerates dramatically, the state agencies would be down about from 18 to 20%, and that means a fifth, and they have to be cut equally, and that would mean like a fifth of your highway patrolmen might not be funded, or a fifth of your school teachers, or a fifth of your whatever it might be, and that's awfully high. And we've tried to tighten our belts. We have 2,000 less employees in state government now than we had a year ago. We estimate we've saved about $30 million in salaries. We've cut down travel 20% over what it was last year. We've tried and tried, but we are down in Oklahoma. It's just down. Well,
that will happen.
You have three options, and that you have three clear options, and that is no special session and no tax increase, which in itself says, well, let's reduce by about 16% the funding of state government. And that's pretty dramatic. The other would be to have a tax increase that would maintain it at the level where you are and say no progress, but try to preserve the progress you have. Another one would be to raise taxes enough that you could continue the progress in education, et cetera, that you wanted to. I'd say it's the most critical decision I've had to make as governor, because I have been very proud of the fact that Oklahoma is among the lowest taxed people in the nation. The first 4 years I was governor, every single year we lowered